faint rattle of a sneaky snake, yeah.
Did you miss me? I don't think I've done an update since maybe sometime in the late winter of 22 or early winter of 23 where I did the fog light mod. But I've done a few things since then. We're sitting in mid-July now of 23. And over the winter, after the fog light mod, I replaced the bushings in the front end and upgraded to polyurethane. For some reason, I didn't do the sway bar end links, so that's on the to-do list. But there's new bushings in the power steering rack, a new power steering rack, as a matter of fact. And then for the sway bar, there's a new alternator. I did lowering springs with new Koni Orange shocks, new wheels and tires, caster camber plates, and a new clutch cable, new quadrant, new firewall adjuster. So that's everything that I did over the winter, and ideally I would kind of compartmentalize everything and put a separate video for each of them, but I'm lazy and I'm just gonna dump them all into one video because I don't think I did any like super comprehensive footage of the installation. They're just kind of basic in general. So yeah, I'm just gonna dump them all into this one video, and hopefully that'll take care of you guys for a little while. The most recent update is that I have, you can't see it, it's just out of frame. I got a tube of new Avery Dennison gloss white. I did buy a sample size off of Amazon. You can get them for a couple of bucks. And it's not an exact match, but it's close enough for me, and eventually I'm gonna wrap every panel in this stuff. But for now, I just wanna take care of the roof. I'm tired of driving around with this primered roof. It looks like crap. The only problem is I've got the car registered for Street Machine Nationals 23 here in St. Paul, but I've got 6 days before the show, and it's really hard to find time to work on this car, and I'm still gonna have to keep primering, and I'm gonna have to sand and re-primer again, and probably put like clear coat or something on there just to help it stick, but we'll see. I may not get it done in time though, so that'll have to wait until next year. But of course, after the show, I'll definitely have it done. But that's what I got for now, guys. So let's dig in. Okay, so wiggle the wheel back and forth. Alright guys, this is going to be a quick lazy video. If you want a better one, there are plenty on YouTube. But not much going on here. Replacing the power steering rack with a new one. So first thing we're going to do is take off this bolt right here and the cotter pin. That's for your outer tie rod. So we'll get those loose, knock that out, and then towards the front here you've got the 2 bolts and nuts that secure the rack to the K-frame, or the K-member, and we'll do the same thing on the other side with the tie rod end. Alright guys, so we got the tie rod ends loose and the rack is centered. I do have the steering wheel pointed straight ahead. So next step is going to be here and here. You got an 18 mil on one side and 15 on the other side, and you have to counter them because otherwise it's just going to spin likely. So once we get those out, then we can disconnect the pressure lines here. So you got 2 of them, and that's going to be it. And you can just slide the rack straight off. Excellent. More leaks to fix. So it looks like I'm developing a small oil leak here. I know these cars are prone to leaking from the oil cooler, you know, part of the oil filter housing, and possibly the oil pressure sending unit. So yeah, maybe once I get this steering rack out of the way, I can get a better idea of where that's coming from. But it is over 100,000 miles, so it wouldn't hurt to do an oil cooler rebuild. All right, another thing we're going to be doing is that bolt right in the middle. That's the pinch bolt that holds the steering shaft to the power steering unit. So 13 millimeter to get that loose, and should come out. You do want to make sure your wheel doesn't spin if you have airbags, so this one does. And if you would be reinstalling it, you would want to take like a paint marker and mark the pinch bolt in relation to where the steering rack is, so that your wheel's not all cockeyed when you get it all back together. Alright, the steering shaft is disconnected from the power steering rack, so all that's left to do is to get behind this and pry it off. We're going to slide this forward off of these bushing pins, but that's all we're going to be doing. After that comes off, then we go back over the driver's side and we take off the pressure and return lines. All right, we got the bushings pulled loose from the bosses on the K member here, so this is just hanging loose, and right in the back, these lines in the corner here, you can see there's 4 lines going on here. The 2 with the kind of square head underneath is going to be an 18 millimeter nut. So once we get that off, the whole rack comes out. All right, that's it. We got the pressure and return lines removed, and this steering rack is completely free from the car. So I've got the new rack stuck up next to the old ones, just so I can compare it and make sure everything looks like a match. Everything looks good. The only difference is the inner tie rods are a little bit longer than the old ones, so we'll have to compensate. It shouldn't be a big deal, but yeah, that's the only difference I'm seeing. So first thing I gotta do is get some channel locks or vice grips on that steering shaft right there to center it. So what you're gonna do is get a hold of them, and you'll turn it all the way to one side, and then you'll count how many turns it takes to get all the way to the other side. You'll split the difference, and then you'll be centered. Okay guys, here's where we're at now. With the rack removed, the lines are free here, so what I want to do is clean these up, and after those are cleaned up, we're gonna install these new O-rings here. You can tell these are, one of it's just shredded. Yeah, that's one of them. So those are gonna get replaced, and then we'll be ready to pop those back onto the power steering rack. And yeah. One thing I forgot to mention, I've been reading online and I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube. I guess what a lot of people like to do is soften these up first by submerging them, you know, like in a coffee cup with some hot water in it. Let them soak for a couple minutes to soften them up, and then they'll take them and they'll run them down just to kind of lightly stretch them out. They'll run them down like a 3/8 extension up to this little taper right here to kind of stretch them out before they put them onto the lines, because a lot of people will put them in without doing that, and they tend to break pretty easily if you do that. So that's what I'm going to try. Okay guys, there we go. We got the new O-rings installed. Be warned, these will try your patience. It's just like I was saying before, it helps to soak them. Oops, right back on the fluid. It helps to soak them in some hot water to give them just a slight bit of pliability. when you take them out of the package, you'll see it's like hard plastic is what it feels like. But the hot water will give it just enough pliability to where you can just gently walk it on one thread at a time. I worked it on with my thumbnail. You might even want to use something softer, less sharp, but it got on there. You got to take your time and be patient because these are really easy to break. All right, installing the polyurethane bushings on the steering rack. You'll want to do this on any kind of polyurethane bushing. PTFE grease, or marine grease they call it. You want to get that all over anything that's going to be touching. And one thing I'm going to do before I get everything put together is clean up this driver's side, because it's leaked all over and it's just crusty, and why not? I'm here, so whatever. All right, guys, we got ourselves the new steering rack fully installed and red polyurethane bushings. Red because race car. And this really wasn't too bad. You know, I would say the scariest part of the whole job for me was dealing with the O-rings that go for the pressure lines up here. Those hard, whatever they're made of, Teflon or whatever. But they're scary because they don't seem to want to flex very much, and you need them to get over those threads. But just heat them up in a cup of water, for hot water, for a couple minutes, and gently stretch them over something that's slightly bigger than those lines, and you can just kind of walk it, you know, one thread at a time, and you should be able to get it on there without breaking them. Other than that, it's really pretty straightforward. And you know, I followed the LMR video to do this, and they were talking about taking one of the sleeves off, the sleeves that go inside these bushings, to help get it aligned, but I didn't have to. Everything just popped on nice and easy. I didn't have any clearance issue. I mean, the only difference in this rack versus the OEM one that I pulled out was the tie rod ends, the inner tie rods, were about half an inch longer than the OE ones, so you may have to compensate for that depending on whose rack you end up buying to replace. But yeah, really not a bad install at all. All done. So as you can see, I have the engine partially disassembled once again, because when I was putting on the new wheels and tires, I had the car raised up and I pulled off the factory wheel and I noticed a puddle under the car. Didn't know what that was coming from, but I wiped my finger on it and took a whiff, and it's definitely coolant. And it's funny because you'll remember last year when I did the IMRC clean, I think I mentioned that I reused the factory O-rings because the ones I ordered from Rock Auto were the wrong size, and I lost patience and I decided that the factory ones looked okay, so I just put them back in, and it had a slow leak and it finally spilled over. But yeah. This one on the passenger side of the coolant crossover tube was shredded when I pulled it back out, so that was the source of the leak. But I was freaking out thinking it was going to be a heater core or something like, you know, the line that runs along this valley here. But it wasn't that bad, thankfully. But I could not see anything until I took that intake hat off, and you can't see it now, but I had a flashlight down here, and well, you can see that there's a reflection right there. Yeah, right under my finger. Like pretty much every little dip on the passenger side of this IMRC plate, like where the injector ports are, there's coolant pooled up. And when I jack the car up, it spilled over and it was dripping kind of to the right side of the transmission bell housing. And when I got the intake lid off, I was able to follow it, and it all came from right up here. So that's the first thing I gotta fix before I get back into the parts that I intended to replace. So we're kind of having to retread old ground, unfortunately, but should just take a minute and we'll be good. All right, so full of coolant and new O-rings are installed on the crossover pipe, and I'm not seeing any leaks. This is all stuff from prior, but there's nothing dripping anymore, so I'm hoping that took care of it. Alright, so part of this oil cooler rebuild, one, is going to involve draining the oil, so that's already done. Next thing we got to do is drain the coolant. So right here is where you're going to loosen. It doesn't take much to get that going, and then there's a little spout right here. I just hooked a rubber tube up to it so that I could drain it in here. Otherwise it's just going to go all over the place. Here's the first thing I'm noticing after draining the coolant is at the bottom of this reservoir, there's a lot of junk in there, like sand or something. So yeah, be interesting to see what's going to be inside that cooler. Alright, so I'm stuck at the moment. I need a half-inch hex bit to get the filter adapter off, and I could have sworn that I went and bought one, but either I didn't or I've lost it, and neither one of those would surprise me. So while I'm waiting on my wife to pick one up for me, I will start on the sway bar here, and I'll replace them with some new polyurethane ones, as look how old and dry rotted those are. So out with the old and in with the new. Not much to getting this front sway bar off. The sway bar end link, the nut on that one is going to be a 15 mil, and then on the bracket for the bushings we're replacing, that's going to be a 15 mil. And there's 2 bolts, one on each side. Well, there's your driver's side bushing on the sway bar. Assuming these are factory, I did not know these were made by Clevite. For any noobs out there, Clevite makes engine bearings. Interesting. But yeah, these are pretty well toasted. Yeah, time for new ones. All right, oil cooler has popped out. I almost wonder if somebody's been here before. This is kind of like RTV here, real squishy and rubbery feeling. I don't know, but yeah, we're gonna be replacing this O-ring, and then inside those holes there, we're gonna knock out the inner element, and there's gonna be more O-rings on the inside that we're gonna replace, and then we'll get this nice and cleaned up and pop it back in. Alright, so I have the actual heat exchanger out of the oil cooler, and just like Truck and Roll's YouTube videos that I followed to do this job, I have a bunch of weird chunks in here. I have no clue what it's from, but yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, we'll get this cleaned out and get those new O-rings in and get it back together. Alright, so this is everything I pulled out of that oil cooler. Just crazy looking stuff. It's like, you know, some of it looks like old plastic or gasket material like this, and there's like 1 or 2 more. It's like glass, and like this right here, right there,
Those are like actual like ribbons of metal. So yeah, I don't know if that's leftover stuff for the factory or what. It's just crazy that that's all in there. So I picked what was there off of the surface, and then for the rest I just blew it out with an air gun. And I'm gonna give that thing a good rinse and dry it out before I get everything back together. I don't want that crap going back in the car. Well, forgive me, I got lazy and I was already under the car and I didn't want to get back out to film it, but it's not that big of a deal. So the entire assembly, this is going to be the outside part, and let's see, this is going to be the outside part. So this is the housing for the heat exchanger, which is right here. So that goes inside that, but through that is going to be the oil filter adapter. So from the outside, after you get the oil filter off, you unscrew the adapter that's going through the middle of it. Then you can pull out this entire part as a full unit, and then you can, you know, pry out the heat exchanger to do all that stuff. And then once you get this out of the car, then this is all that's left. And this is the part that's attached to the block of the engine. So all it is just 4 10mm bolts. Yeah, there's one more up there, but yeah, it's just 4 bolts, and then the whole thing comes off, and then that's your gasket underneath, and this is our new one. So we'll get it cleaned up and get it thrown back in. All right, we're at moment of truth to see if all of the stuff that I fixed is actually fixed. So we're looking for a bunch of leaks, and hopefully they're all gone. So first thing's gonna be the coolant. So we got the heater set to go full blast with the heat. So we'll get out there, we'll keep an eye on it and see if stuff starts bubbling over. Well, joyous news. So we're looking pretty good down here. I've got the level just about right, and thermostat's opened up. We got heat going through these hoses. Nothing's leaking up top. All that extra stuff, that's just overflow stuff that I spilled. And then if we go down here, there's the oil cooler. We're not getting any leaks anymore. So looks like we're good to go. All right, well, I'm pretty glad I did the rebuild. I had the car running for probably about 15-20 minutes because I was dealing with the coolant levels and making sure all the air was burped out of it. But in that time, the oil got warmed up and we're looking spotless on this oil cooler, so that's awesome. And up top, the cap for the bottle on there, the original one went bad. I was spewing coolant out of there, so that was the other problem I had. So that's got a replacement cap on there, and it's holding pressure and nothing's spewing out of there anymore. So yeah, really happy. Now I don't have a bunch of crap dripping out of here. And same with the power steering rack. Got a new unit in here. That's some leftover stuff I got to clean up from when the oil cooler was leaking. But yeah, this is awesome. All right, next project is going to be a new clutch cable. This will be an adjustable type with a firewall adjuster. And then we have a new billet aluminum clutch quadrant to replace the factory plastic type. All right, first thing we're going to do, we got to get out of the car, and we're going to take this 10mm bolt off. And this is for the little dust shield that goes over where the clutch cable attaches to the fork. So that'll come off, and then we just pop this off. I should really resituate. I'm like 2 inches from touching this with my face. So this is towards the front of the car, heading rearward. Here's your access cover. Of course, most of you guys have seen this on my clutch video, so it should be new. Dust cover off. So here's our clutch cable right here. And there's the clutch fork. So what we're gonna do is get a pry bar. We're gonna pry this fork forward so that we can get the cable out. All right, so here we go. Let's pry this thing forward so we can get this cable out. So slide her up the groove and then it comes back out through this hole. All right, clutch cable is free. And next thing I gotta do is right there, there's a little retaining clip. Pull that out and then you can pull the cable all the way through. Like I said, we're gonna pry this retaining clip down. I just got a crap little flathead screwdriver. All right, so that comes out. And hard to believe, I might have that info wrong, but I swear somebody said hang on to those because Ford doesn't make them anymore. I don't know if that's true or not. But anyway, just pull on the cable and it should come straight through. There you go. Now what we're gonna do is come up to the top and up against the firewall, you can see where the cable comes through. So you're just gonna follow it. It's goddamn autofocus. You'll follow this cable all the way down. It'll go past the exhaust manifold. But, yep, there we go, right there. There's a bracket here, retaining bracket. So we'll take that out and then we can snake the rest of the cable up to the top. This might vary from car to car. Or, you know, from GTs to Cobras. This is a Cobra. So you'll follow the cable right there coming out of the firewall. And as we get down towards the exhaust manifold, there's this retainer right here. I don't know if that comes out or if you just loosen it up to get this out, but further down, it's hard to see through the camera, yeah. Right in the middle of the screen, you can see that red grounding cable just above it, that small rusty nut sitting out. That's the bottom bracket that we're gonna go after first. So it's just above the oil filter. And with this car, it looks like I'm gonna have to get underneath again because I can't squeeze my arm through there. I'll have to film over the top to verify this, but it looks like you can do this without having to actually crawl under the car. So it's on the other side of this part right here. So let me go over. Not like I can see, but all right, we're back under the car. See what the hell I'm filming. All right. So right above, sorry about the autofocus, right above there, you can see right under my finger. That's the bolt we're going after. Possible to probably reach underneath and get it without crawling under the car, but I'm just gonna do that. A little easier too if you pry this splash guard out of the way, and then you should be able to get to it. It's kind of a tight squeeze fitting your hand in there. If you got an extended instead of this stubby, that's probably a better idea. All right, got that stupid little sheet metal screw out. That was a pain in the ass to get to. It's just hard squeezing my fat fingers in there. But yeah, like I said, if you got an extendable 1/4 inch ratchet, that works great. So that bracket's pulled loose, so we can start pulling this out. One thing that I've seen, like on Danny Johnson's videos that he does for these, he recommends that you take the clutch cable, the new one, and get it started to mimic what you have going on with the old one, just so you don't forget where it needs to route. But I'm filming, so I obviously just have the video to look back on, so I'll skip that step. So I'm just going to start working this cable out and start pulling it up towards the top. You can already tell it's been resting on something there. K-member or power steering lines or something. But no, I'm not going to make you watch this whole thing. Okay, so same as the lower bolt that's way down low for that bracket. It's the same thing up here. This is going to be an 8 mil. So we'll pop that loose and we can pull the entire cable up. Well, add a new PCV valve to the mix. I was trying to pull the clutch cable up and it was up against this hose and I didn't see it when I was pulling it, so I put so much tension on it that I snapped the old PCV valve. That's fine. This thing is ancient anyway. Alright, this is where it's super awkward to film. So I'm crammed here in the footwell on the driver's side. Right there is your factory clutch quadrant. Right there in the end, you're going to grab some pliers and you're going to pull that cotter pin out, or retaining clip, whatever you're going to call it. And you'll pull that out, and then the plastic quadrant will slide off of that shaft, and it shouldn't give us any trouble because we already loosened the cable from the transmission side. All right, got that retaining clip out. What a surprise, my ADD ass cannot seem to find my needle nose pliers, so I just had to make do with this little mini screwdriver. So I just got it in there and yanked down. And she's out of there. So now we can pull the quadrant out. All right, camera is precariously set on a wrench. So reaching up in here, and indeed, the quadrant slides off with persuasion, it seems. There we go. All right, so we got the old quadrant out and cable is free. So one other thing that is getting replaced, it's not even getting replaced, it's just not gonna be used anymore. That little white piece moving right there, that's the top teeth that come into contact with the teeth on the quadrant. And that's also plastic, but this new billet one that we're using doesn't even use this part, so this will be eliminated altogether. So that's one less thing to fail. All right, with the cable loose in the footwell, we're just gonna pull these prongs back so that we can pull this housing out, and then we can pull this all the way through the firewall.
Mustang.
All right, I had to move my oil catch can up because it was kind of getting in my fat hands way. I've seen a lot of videos on removing these, and typically I see a lot of people being able to get it out from right here. For instance, the Danny Johnson video, where you just spread these tangs and you can pull this part straight out. But this car, it wasn't happening. It's like it's glued in there or something, I don't know. But yeah, just double checked for reference in my factory manual. They have you actually remove these screws and then remove this as an assembly. So I don't know if it varies from year to year. This is for a 97 Cobra, and I know a lot of the ones I watch are new edges. So I don't know if they changed anything, but just letting you know. All right, after the factory quadrant comes out, this is part of the self-adjusting mechanism that goes on the quadrant. This white piece of plastic right here, that's the other piece that comes off, and that gets eliminated with the new kit that we're putting in. This is all done on the firewall under the hood. All right, firewall adjuster is in. It needs to be spun, obviously, to get lined up with where the hardware goes, but it's a tight fit. So I didn't want to smash up the face of it, so I just took a block of wood and then hammered against it to knock it in place. All right, first thing we're gonna do for putting in these new shocks and springs, first thing you gotta do, you're gonna get behind the brake caliper, and your mounting bolts are gonna be one on top and there's one down below, just down there, 215mm bolts. Caliper is gonna come off and then we'll hang it up to the side. All right, so now we have the caliper removed and hung up out of the way. Rotor is removed, so the next step is going to be loosening this sway bar and link right here. This is going to come off, and then the only thing left is to get these two bolts off right here. That's going to be the last thing holding your lower assembly in, but before you go loosening that, you're going to want to support your control arm with the jack so the spring doesn't go flying out, because that could really hurt you or even kill you. So we'll make sure to do that before we loosen anything up. Also, one other thing to note, when you're pulling this whole assembly apart, it's a good idea. This is an E8 Torx socket, and that'll take the ABS, that'll take the ABS sensor out, so you can get it out of the way, because then you're not pulling on it, and it's better to get it out of the way anyway, so you can get a socket around this bottom nut. All right, so we've all seen this before. You have the bolts off the strut right here, and sway bar and link is undone, so literally the only thing holding this up is the jack. So we're gonna stand off to the side in case that spring decides to go flying out, but you just ease it down and slowly decompress that spring. Easing it on down. All right, that's all the way down. She's all clear. All right, factory spring is pried out. That'll take some finagling just because that spring is so tall. You could also use a spring compressor, which I have, but I've already done this before and I know it can be done without it. So that's out, and you can look at the difference here. Factory, obviously, and then our 1.5 inch drop one. So yeah, this will be pretty sweet. All right, everybody's favorite part about this job is this stupid slotted shaft that you basically have to stick a flat blade screwdriver to keep this from spinning, and then a wrench underneath it to get this nut off. I haven't done this before, but from my understanding is these like to seize up and they're just a pain in the ass to get off. But yeah, I'm gonna try it by hand first, and if I can't get it that way, I'm gonna try an impact next. Okay, I'm back. So this took a lot of work just to be able to get it to spin. Trying it as is with just PB Blaster got me nowhere, so I put it on a low air setting, my air hammer, and then just kind of lightly tapped around the edges here. And then I tried it again, and then I was able to get it going. But there's only so far you can go to where you can't hold anything in this slot anymore once you're flush up. So I'm really not sure how else to go about this, but the way I see it, since I'm not reusing any of this, I'm going with caster camber plates, and the new shocks come with their own hardware, so I'm just going to cut this off. I'm not going to be reusing it, so who cares? Alright, got a little bit ahead of myself, no big deal. The factory setup, if you're switching to caster camber plates, factory setup is going to be 3 bolts, and then there's 2 rivets right here. So obviously just take these bolts out. These rivets you're going to have to drill out, and if you're going to, what I would recommend, and most people recommend, is going to a 4-bolt setup for the new CC plates. So there's going to be a 4th bolt right here, and you're going to end up drilling through there. And yeah, that's how you do that for the 4-bolt one. All right, factory setup. So you got your top cap. Jesus Christ, I can't do this. Sorry, partially taken apart because I can't do this one-handed. So you have this top part that goes on top of the bushing, and this comes out. You got the bump stop. I think I had that wrong, actually. I think this fit in there. But anyway, and you got the dust cover that's going to come off, and then you have the bump stop on the inside. And I believe this bump stop gets reused. All right, that's one side mostly done. I have to stop here because my caster camber plates aren't here yet, so that's going to be the last step. All right, we're moving on to the rears here. So, got the rear end jacked up, supported right by the torque boxes there, just next to the muffler on each side. And then I'm gonna put some slight support under the shock mount down here, and then we're gonna go up top and then start up there. So after you pull the lining out, you're gonna have this on each side. We'll get to the other one. And it's gonna be similar to up front, where you're gonna have to get like a vice grips on the top of that stud. And when you start spinning it, it'll bump into the wheel well and it'll hold it in place. Then you can spin that nut off and get the bushing out, and then we can go down below and get the rest off. Alright, pardon the air compressor. Gotten this shock mount bolt buzzed loose, and we're loose at the top, so it should be ready to drop out. So we're going to grab from here, and it should pop out, and there you go. Easy. Alright, so at the top of the old shock, you have this piece, this bushing with this metal cup. I just pulled that off of the original and put it onto here, and you'll have to do that sometimes with shocks. You'll reuse stuff from the other shock, but yeah. All right, that popped in, no problem. So we're good to rebolt that. All right. Pulling this stock spring out, you're going to want to support from right here, and obviously the shock's going to have to be undone because that's going to be the last thing holding the rear end up, but you need to drop it. So unbolt the shock, and then you're going to slowly let the jack out to take pressure off of the spring, and then you should be able to pry it out. And getting the new one in should be a lot easier because it's considerably shorter, so shouldn't be an issue. Well, I'm gonna have to pause here because I'm noticing that these spring isolators are completely shot, and I didn't notice that before. I foolishly assumed they would be in decent condition because my front ones are perfect, which I reused. There's no dry rot or anything on the front ones, but these are just wasted. So yeah, I'm gonna have to order some new isolators before I put these new springs in, otherwise it's pointless. I'm not driving around without isolators. That's gonna be annoying. I'm gonna guess this has a lot to do with why it's so noisy under the hood. Look at this bearing. And she's still spinning. Nope. Oh my God. They're finally here. Let's unbox them! Okay, got the first box popped open. Oh, sick! So 275s, those should be the front. So this is a front wheel here. So we'll pop that out, see how that bad boy looks. All right, got the front wheel out of the box here. Here's inside. Oh man, these are wide. This is gonna be sweet. Going from 235s to 275s in the front. Yes. There you go. There's your 0304 Cobra replica. And of course the rear is going to be a deep dish with a recessed center part with a nice big lip. So yeah, we'll start digging for those too. All right, got the second box popped open. Let's see what we got. Oh yeah, that's a rear. Oh my God, it's so wide. 315s. Again, this is replacing 235s that are currently on there, so this is just going to be a ridiculous amount of difference. I cannot wait. So let's pull this beauty out, see how it looks. Yeah, I think I made the right choice. These are so sick. And the width. Like, I mean, that's, yeah, there's my stubby little sausage fingers, but you can't really get an idea of the scale of this thing unless, you know, you have it on the car or next to the crappy tires that are on there. Like, this thing is so ridiculously wide. And this lip, this deep dish, oh, dude. I am beyond jacked. I can't wait to put these on.